I'm Lex and welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is doing well. So today I'm going to do a video on my birth and labour story. This is actually the third time I filmed it because I couldn't remember half of it and I had to sit down with my partner and get him to talk me through what happened from his point of view so I could kind of put the two stories together and figure out exactly what did happen. So side note, super awkward, we've got no blinds in this room and I'm upstairs, and I've obviously got like a ring light on for filming, so I'm hoping no one walks past and thinks what the hell is she doing. So just before I jump into it, I would absolutely love it if you would like and subscribe. It would mean the world. So birth story. The day before I gave birth, I thought I went into labour and I started to feel like a weird kind of crampy pain, but it did subside and completely disappear, so I didn't think anything of it. So yeah, I don't know if that was the actual start of my labour or not, or I was just having some Braxton Hicks. So that evening I went to bed. It was quite unusual for me that night because I did sleep all night with no disturbances. Towards the end of my pregnancy, I was waking up multiple times a night to go to the toilet, and I was having really bad insomnia, so for me to sleep all night was really unusual. So I woke up about 9:30. At this point I was 39 plus 5, and when I woke up I think I must have felt okay. I can't remember exactly how I felt when I woke up, but I realised that I was starting to get period pains. They weren't too bad and I was just kind of on my phone scrolling. So I have a photo here and it's from the day I gave birth at 9:41 a.m. And in October 2020, I was meant to be going on a hen do with my friend and I thought she'd look amazing in that. So I'd screenshot that and that was at 9:41. So my pain started to increase from there. My partner was at work in the other room, so I called him in and said to him like, I've got period pain, and I was in an hour and I didn't know if it was the start of labour or I was just in some pain. So he ran me a bath and went and made me a coffee, and I got in the bath and had my coffee. I found after a while of being in the bath it wasn't really helping and I was becoming more uncomfortable, so I decided to get out the bath. So I got out, got dry, went back in the bedroom. I then started to get very clear contractions. It wasn't just period pain anymore. I could feel when they started, when they finished, and I did have a break in between. At this point my contractions were getting worse, but I was still walking around the house. I remember I went down to put the dog's ear medication in and holding on to things, having contractions in between, and then went back upstairs at some point. My other half said, you know, how are you feeling? And at that point I said to him like, start getting ready because once you're ready I think we're gonna go to the hospital. So he started to get ready and get everything together, and then it got to the point where I was like, we're leaving now. Like, I don't care what's ready and what isn't ready, we need to go to the hospital because the pain got so intense. So at the time I was so confused because I'd woken up around 9:30, the pain maybe started 15 minutes after that, and at this point it's like 11:20, 11:30. How can I be in so much pain now? And then I was really scared because I thought, how am I going to do this if I'm in that much pain now and my labour's only just started? So we went downstairs to go to the hospital. My mother-in-law was there and she was rubbing my back during my contractions, and I was getting really clammy and sweaty, and I remember saying to her like, you are not getting any more grandchildren out of me. And I half meant it, but I was joking at the same time. So we got in the car and we drove to the hospital. We arrived at the hospital around midday. So I gave birth in LGI. So the car park for LGI is a multi-storey car park. So this car park, it's a decent walk away from the entrance to A&E. So not even like the maternity ward or anything like that, but just from the actual A&E entrance. It would take you like maybe not quite 5 minutes, but not far off to walk from the car park itself over there. So we get to the car park and there are 0 parking spaces, which is a blessing in disguise really, because at the time I was like, yeah, we'll park there and I'll walk in. I didn't realise, you know, the pain was getting worse. I wasn't going to be able to walk very much. So my other half ended up dropping me off at the doors of the hospital. So I get out and all I had was my phone and my maternity notes, and he went away to park the car. So we got dropped off at the A&E entrance and I had to make my way to maternity assessment unit, which isn't the closest to A&E. So I don't really know what I was thinking. I just kind of like rocked up the hospital and started walking there. I didn't think to kind of like tell anybody or I don't know what was going through my head. And then luckily a lovely lady came up to me and she asked me if I was in labour and told me she was a midwife. Thank the Lord. I think she was actually going on a dinner break. So she and another member of staff helped me get to the maternity assessment unit. The staff member in front went through and was kind of making sure all the doors were held open and the lift was ready to go, so that once we got there I was straight in and straight up. I remember her ringing the ward saying that I was having 3 contractions every 10 minutes. And again, I was so much confusion going through my mind, because how could I be having 3 every 10 minutes when it had been like 2 hours? How is that even possible? So when we arrived at the maternity assessment unit, I was in a wheelchair and I remember getting wheeled to the front desk, and one of the members of staff said to me, can I go and do a urine sample? And I was just like, hell no, like I cannot get out of this wheelchair. So I got wheeled to a bed in one of the bays. So they wheeled me to the bed and I managed to get in the bed, and at the time I had leggings and a top on, so I took my leggings off so they could examine me. So the lady that came to examine me was, you know, doing her thing, and turned around and told me I was 8 centimetres dilated. Now, the relief, I can't put into words the relief, because at this point the pain was so intense and so horrific, and I thought I was maybe 2 centimetres because my waters hadn't broke. So simultaneously while this is happening, my other half went to park the car, so he parked up. We hadn't spoke on the phone or anything, so he wasn't aware of how far along I was, so he just brought himself in. He didn't bring the bags because we weren't even sure if we'd need them when we set off, because we didn't know if they were going to send me away if I was only, you know, 1 or 2 centimetres dilated. So he gets to the hospital, he gets to the maternity assessment unit, and he buzzes and speaks to the staff and says, oh, my partner's in here, she's just arrived, like I'd just like an update. And they were saying, oh, well, you know, you can't come in. And then once he gave my name, they said to him, oh, actually she's going straight to delivery suite. So I get off the bed, get back into a wheelchair, and they're wheeling me to the delivery suite, and I met up with him in the hallway. And I remember calling my dad, or my dad calling me, and all I remember saying was, I'm 8 centimetres and I can't talk, because my brain was just somewhere else. So we arrived at the delivery suite, and at the time as well, neither of us had to wear a mask in the hospital, so the masks became mandatory a few days after I gave birth, so neither of us were wearing masks during the labour. My partner was able to come in, and we knew from the start that he was only able to be with me from when I was in established labour, but obviously with me already being 8 centimetres, he was able to just come straight to the delivery suite with me. So once I got to the delivery suite, I undressed and put a gown on and got into the bed and met the midwife. I had the nicest, loveliest, most supportive, amazing midwife ever. I'm so grateful that I had such a positive experience with my midwife. So at this point my water still hadn't broke, and they asked to put a cannula in my hand. So she kind of examined me and was, you know, doing what she needed to do down there, and the pain for me was just getting unbearable, so I did ask to have an epidural. Now, the one thing I said to my partner before I went into hospital is that I do not want an epidural. Please do not let me get an epidural. I just don't want one. I have had a spinal before, so I know how still you need to sit to get one in, and I know how it feels afterwards. I know the catheter situation, and I just didn't want that straight after I'd had a baby. So yeah, I did say to him, please do not let me get one. The midwife as well explained that, you know, she will go and get the I think it's the anaesthetist to come and speak to me about the epidural, but at this point she wouldn't necessarily recommend it because of how far along I was. By the time I got it and it kicked in, I would have already pretty much gave birth. So they did go and get the anaesthetist, who came in and spoke to me. I'm not gonna lie, he was really rude, and like the last thing you need when you're in labour is someone being rude, but whatever. At this point my contractions were so close together that there was just no way I could have sat still for that long for him to actually administer the epidural. And my other half kind of calmed me down a little bit, spoke to me, reasoned with me as much as he possibly could, and I said no to it in the end. And instead they offered me an injection for pain relief. I spoke to my other half about this. We think it was morphine, but we're not 100% sure, so whatever the standard injection would be for pain relief, that's what I had. So Sophie ended up dropping that much that the monitors couldn't read like her heart rate and things like that. So at this point the midwife asked if she could break my waters to put a little clip on her head so that they could monitor Sophie's heart rate, and that way they would know if she was in any distress. I was on another planet at this point, so I just said to my other half, like, please just decide, like, just decide for me. So we agreed, and she broke my waters and then popped a clip on Sophie's head so they could monitor her. So while I was laid in the bed, I was kind of tossing and turning side to side. I did try and get on all fours at one point, and that was not for me, which I thought that's how I would give birth. That's how I kind of imagined in my head that I would give birth. However, when I got there, it was an absolute bloody no-go. And I lasted about 2 minutes and I laid back on my side. So that offered me this like peanut bouncy ball thing. So I put the peanut between my legs and I was just like, get it off me, I'm sick of it. I just didn't like them at all. I just laid on my side. And in the end, they pulled the stirrups down so I could put my leg in a stirrup. So I gave birth on my side, facing my partner. So during one of my contractions, I did pull my cannula out. If I did have another baby, I just wouldn't get one to start off with because I really dislike them. I remember laid on my side having this contraction and seeing the cannula and feeling it, and it was irritating me, and I just thought, I don't need anything else giving me pain and grief right now. So I just ripped it out, and I don't know where I threw it. I didn't get another one back in, and that was the end of the cannula situation. So shortly after that, the midwife said, right, we're ready to push. The whole thing was a whirlwind. Like, bearing in mind, I woke up at 20 to 10 and was screenshotting and scrolling. I got to the hospital at 12 o'clock, and now all of a sudden she's telling me, you know, I need to push. I remember giving one big push, and I knew I hadn't pushed as hard as I could have, and the midwife turned around and said, you need to push harder than that. And the reason I didn't was I felt like I was going to rip from back to front, and I'm sure everyone has the same feeling, because it's this intense fire burning. Like, the best way I can describe it is if someone gets a kind of hairspray, sets it on fire, and then puts it down there. So she told me, you know, you need to push again, you need to push harder. So I gave one massive push and felt Sophie's head pop right out there. So at this point, she told me to stop pushing, and the one thing I remember reading and people telling me was that when your midwife says push, push, when your midwife says stop, stop. So I stopped pushing. I really didn't want to tear. At this point, we kind of paused for a second, and then she told me to push again, and then Sophie basically came out. So Sophie was born at 2 o'clock on the dot. It took a few minutes for that to sink in. I'm not gonna lie. I was very much in shock. I was very much just not ready for that whole situation to happen so quickly. So once she was born, my partner cut the cord and they took Sophie over to get cleaned up. So she was crying but not very loud, and I remember us both saying like, is everything okay, and everything, you know, is everything okay? And they were like, yeah, everything's fine. And then at the same time, kind of more people were coming in the room and they're saying it was, no, everything's fine. And then someone else comes in the room and we were like, well, is it, isn't it? So basically she cried, but she didn't cry that loud, but her airways were clear and she was breathing. The concern was that she actually swallowed some meconium, so she basically had pooed in her waters and inhaled and swallowed it. So after that, we got to hold her. I FaceTimed my parents and my cousin. I actually screen recorded it. My mum was supposed to be with me when I gave birth, but obviously COVID didn't permit that, which was really sad. But I was grateful that my partner could be there with me. So we had to get moved to the postnatal ward. So at this point, my partner had to leave. So this was on a Friday. And in the end, we were not discharged until the following Saturday, which was not expected. So we ended up getting moved to transitional care. So at this point, Sophie started to go downhill. They did do a chest x-ray and she had indeed swallowed the meconium. I remember this day so vividly because it was one of the hardest days of the whole experience. At this point they told me they may need to do a lumbar puncture and they suspected sepsis. My partner wasn't allowed to come in, he wasn't allowed to see us, he wasn't allowed to be with us, and it was the same day that Primark reopened. So I am sat there. The queue for Primark in Leeds City Centre is over a mile long, and every Tom, Dick and Harry can go and buy the £3 pair of leggings, but my partner couldn't be there for this news and what Sophie was going through. Again, potentially needed a lumbar puncture with suspected sepsis. So that was really, really, really tough. I was exhausted. We'd been there a few days at this point. I was knackered, I hadn't slept. I was so worried that even when she slept, like, I just couldn't really sleep because I was just constantly checking her breathing, making sure she was okay. So she ended up getting moved to the neonatal ward. Once the baby is on the neonatal ward, you can't stay anymore. Like, there's no bed for you to stay. So you can visit whenever you want. I remember the first night I had to leave her there. I got to the doors and had to turn around to go back and sit with her. And then I went back at like 2 or 3 in the morning as well to go and see her. And then again, first thing the next morning, she did start showing signs of improvement. And then we were able to take her home. So we did bring her home on the Saturday, and it was the day before Father's Day, which was really nice as well. So at the time we were living with my mother-in-law and my partner's stepdad, and we didn't tell them we were actually bringing Sophie back. So we just turned up as a surprise with the baby, and they didn't know she was actually being discharged on that day. So that was really lovely. So yeah, that is pretty much the full story. I did ask on Instagram if anyone had any specific questions, so I'll run through a few of them now. A lot of the questions I think I've already answered in the story, so I won't re-go over them. But someone said, was there anything about labour that totally surprised you or that you weren't prepared for? So one thing that really surprised me is after I gave birth, I thought I would cry, and I am quite an emotional person, but I didn't cry, and I think it was because I was in so much shock. I lay there in complete and utter shock. I remember just laying back and just being like, is she okay? Is she okay? And that was it. There was no tears from me or anything like that. I cannot comprehend how unprepared I was to give birth that quickly. When I first realised I was in labour, I again thought I was 1 to 2 centimetres. So in my head I'm like, right, well, you know, it's 12 o'clock. I might give birth at, you know, 12 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night or tomorrow. And although I was very grateful I had a short labour, I wasn't mentally prepared for how quick it was. To wake up screenshotting photos of bloody bride crowns to giving birth within 4 hours was just a bit of a shock to the system. So a lot of people asked about feeding. Initially I breastfed, and then I expressed, and then I breast and expressed, and then I just breastfed. Then I think breastfed, expressed and formula at one point. And then we realised that Sophie was reacting quite badly to something, and she was diagnosed with CMPA, which is a cow's milk protein allergy. So that got a lot worse when we introduced the formula, and we introduced that because my supply was quite low. At that point we spoke to our GP and we decided to put her on Neocate, which is completely dairy free. And then once she was on that, she was just happy as pie. So someone asked about support. During labour, super supportive, and when we were in hospital, really supported. Outside of that, I would say we had barely any support. I think a lot of that is down to COVID, and I don't want to bash, you know, the healthcare visitors in any way whatsoever. So what advice would you give to other first time mums for labour and birth? So pack your hospital bag in advance. I think I packed it 2 days before I went into labour, and I wish I'd packed it sooner and been a bit more organised with it. Go with the flow as well. I had a list of things I knew I didn't want. So for example, I knew I didn't want an epidural, and I found it really useful to discuss everything I didn't want with my partner beforehand, because once we got in the room, my head was just in the shed and there was no way that I could kind of speak up for myself. So he was able to do that for me. and he was able to ask the questions that I would have wanted to know the answer to and really support me in a way that I needed it, because he knew exactly what I wanted. It's so difficult to plan labour, so if you have kind of a list of things that you definitely want to happen and they don't go to plan, that could maybe stress you out a little bit, which could make labour more difficult. So not having a set list of things that you do want as well, and kind of just letting your body go with the flow, because you want to be as relaxed as possible when you're in there. So any tips to help prevent tearing? My biggest fear at the minute, due later this year. So first of all, congratulations, and second of all, just listen to the midwife. I don't think there's like a cut and dry way to prevent it if it's going to happen necessarily, but I know to minimise it happening, or minimise the chance of it happening, but listening to the midwife. So best believe when my midwife told me to stop pushing, I was cross-legged. Like, there was no way whatsoever even a centimetre more of her was coming out, because I desperately did not want to tear. So someone asked about the experience being a first time home in lockdown and not experiencing the usual stuff. I won't go into this too much because it will be a very negative conversation, but it's not been great. And I know there's more important things in the world going on right now, and I know that I am at home with a healthy baby. All I kind of will say on it, unless people want me to go into more detail in another video, is that I do feel like I've missed out on a lot of things that I would have loved to experience, and one of the only saving graces is that Sophie will not remember any of it. And the last question that I will answer is any little things to pack for labour that we might not think of. A few things that I'm really glad I packed for labour, well, maybe not labour for me, but kind of the whole period of being in hospital. One, adult nappies. And I know they are the most hideous things ever, but I swear to God, they were a 10 out of 10 for after I'd given birth. An extension lead where the plug is on the wall, it's usually quite far away from where you're sat. So if you wanted to plug your phone in to take any photos or FaceTime people, or kind of if you're there overnight and you need your phone light because it's quite dark, but it needs to be plugged in, you want to be able to charge it quite easily, and you don't want to be kind of getting up and walking around. I packed a facial water spray, so I found this useful for a number of reasons. One, it helped cool me down, and two, when I was cleaning Sophie's bum with cotton wool buds and water, I would just spray the water onto the cotton wool rather than having to get up in the middle of the night to fill up like a little pot to use that to clean her, if that makes sense. And the last thing I will say, and these are just random things to pack, the last thing I would say is take your own baby hat, because we didn't, and they put this pink knitted hat on her and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. So I wish I'd have took my own hat. Other than that, during labour, I don't really know. So if anyone has any suggestions for things that you can pack during labour, please leave them below, because again, mine was that quick that I have a chance to do anything. So that is everything. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any more video suggestions, or there is anything you'd like me to go into more detail about, then please let me know below. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.